Our agenda is final action on 2 bills, but I'm going to call Assistant Secretary Kelsey Olson up. We have a late addition that is not in your packet, but Dana's going to send it out, and it has to do with 2564. And Kelsey, if you would just kind of explain what they're going to get, and then it will be online, the materials too online with today's activity, but just in a matter of, for right now, it'll be available just to the committee. So just a quick explainer what that is.
Certainly. Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I do apologize that this was a late addition, but there was a question last week when we worked House Bill 2564 in regards to the administrative overhead costs that the agency had used. And so the breakdown of those costs, of the administrative costs, are outlined. What was identified, proposed as the breakdown, as well as what's been spent to date. And so there is a chart in there. There was just over $500,000 of the $5 million that was set aside for administrative costs. And this went to agency expenses for salary and wages, as well as indirect costs. And then each of the food banks was allowed to take a portion of administrative costs for setting up the program on their end, because they don't typically receive funding like this, and the purchasing of the food required some extra legwork on their part. So they each had funding. That breakdown, so we have the $523,000 that was budgeted. To date, we've only spent almost $255,000 of that administrative costs. So that is all in the email that should be passed around. And again, I apologize for that late submission. It completely slipped my mind. So, but I did want to provide that to you nonetheless. So thank you for allowing me to clarify.
All right, and so that'll be our second one we'll do final action on. And I do things a little different than some other committees. When we do this, I allow, kind of a, it's not a free-for-all, but a carousel, maybe, if that's the right language. Or since it's Valentine's Day, we will treat you to the people that may have the answers you need. I'm trying. I had built up for other things. I wasn't able to use them, so I've got all these I've got to get out of my system. But anyway, so with that, let's get into final action. House Bill 2543. Calling Kyle Hamilton to just a quick explainer.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2543 would amend the current process for registering a brand with and the fee amounts. A person would be required to send an application fee to the commissioner with their proposed brand instead of the registration fee. New language would require the commissioner to then determine whether the brand is available for registration and then send notice to the registrant. The registrant, within 60 days of receiving notice of approval, would then need to remit a registration fee. The bill would specify that separate application and registration fees would be required for each brand for which registration is sought and approved. The amount charged for application, registration, or renewal fees would be capped individually at $100. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. And so what is the will of the committee? We'll call on Representative Minix.
Mr. Chairman, I move that we pass HB 2543 favorably from the committee.
Have a second? Seconded by Featherston. Discussion? Seeing none, Representative Minix, you may close.
I close.
Okay, all those in favor of passing House Bill 2543 favorably, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Motion carried. I did pause for a millisecond. We do welcome back Representative Martinez, which is much easier to say than schlink. See? Yeah. Singing, sleeping, whatever it is, exactly. So maybe we can switch committee. No, welcome. And also welcome Representative McDonald. So you will also want this, you'll find this is your most favorite committee because it's not going to go very long today. So, all right. Well, true. Now we go on to House Bill 2564. And Kyle, once again, a refresher on this bill.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. House Bill 2564 would establish a Kansas Farm to Food Bank program within the Kansas Department of Agriculture. The program would be required to acquire Kansas agricultural food products from agricultural entities or aggregators and then distribute such products to the Kansas Emergency Food System. The program would be subject to appropriation and would be required to dedicate not less than 75% of available funds to acquisition and distribution of Kansas agricultural food products. The Secretary would be required to engage food banks to administer the program. Such participating food banks would not be allowed to assess fees on foods from the program to recipient distribution sites, programs, individuals, or households. The Secretary of Agriculture would have certain duties in administering the program, including adopting rules and regulations to carry out the provisions of the Act. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Committee, what is your wishes for House Bill 2564? Representative Younger.
Mr. Chair, I'd move that we House Bill 2564 favorably from the committee.
Second? Seconded by Carlin. Discussion. Yes, Representative Gardner.
Yes, I would like to explain my vote and position on this bill. There are a lot of things in this bill I really do like. The whole concept of producing fresh food here in Kansas and encouraging people to eat that is really good. There are some things about it that are quite troubling to me. One is a federal program that when the federal money runs out, then we, the taxpayers, are expected to fund that, and that'll be an ongoing expense. I don't like that kind of policy. It also takes taxpayer money and gives it to unelected people to select winners and losers, pick who will be supplying the food and those that will not. So their taxpayer money is going to selected people. The third thing is that food then is given to a distribution system, which is fine. But it is either non-government organization or nonprofits that the taxpayers don't have any control of, which is fine. But, excuse me, we already have taxpayer money going to a system to assist local grocery stores. This will compete directly with them because we're giving away food and they're selling food. We also give food money through the SNAP program to most of these recipients, so they do have access to money to buy food. And we're also putting money through the extension program to train these people how to prepare food, how to buy food, how to meet their needs. And so I see multiple programs that are conflicting here, and I don't particularly like that. So I think it's a great idea, but I think it's bad policy, and that's the reason I will oppose it. Thank you.
Okay. Other discussion? Representative Jacobs.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, committee. If maybe one of the revisers or research, we just had a ag and natural resource budget, and we had added some additional funds to ag and natural resource budget with the, I believe it's the Department of Ag. And so the request was we added another 100,000. We requested to take out another 100,000, and we took out that 100,000 out of this requested million, maybe. Is this million being proposed in this bill, will this be the additional of what we've already proposed and what the federal government is already giving in the last, just in the last recent days with our ag budget? Unless Kelsey, I believe she was there during the time.
I believe
Or would we qualify this as new additional money on top of that?
this million, well, Heather, do you know for sure? This is in the governor's budget recommendation of this additional money. We'll ask Heather, and then I'll ask Ms. Olson to come up, and that's a good thing to know. So go ahead. What do you know there?
Sure.
Thanks.
It's our, Mr. Chairman, Heather O'Hara, Legislative Research. It's our understanding that this bill is like the policy bill that goes along with that money. So if this bill doesn't pass, then when you get to omnibus, you would pull that money out. But it is part of the governor's budget recommendation.
Right. Since we're not a budget committee, we're not appropriating anything today, but.
Correct.
Was it okay? Can we call Kelsey Olson up?
Please, thank you, sir.
To explain that? Good, thank you. Go ahead.
Hello again. So the governor did, in her budget, allocate $1 million to continue the work that we were doing with the LFPA grant. This bill is to outline how those dollars would be spent and how they would be used in the program. It's my understanding that they are not necessarily directly tied to one another, but are coordinated together. So that's my understanding of how the funding was proposed. Again, it was, the governor added into our budget because we're the administrating element of the federal program. Is
Okay.
that helpful?
Well, Representative Jacobs,
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
does that clear it up? I'm a little confused now. So, well, because I guess that's the question, is this money based on a grant from USDA, or this is additional state general fund monies? Do we know for sure?
The governor's budget recommendation is additional SGF that would be used for food purchases that would go to the food banks. It would be in addition to what we're currently doing with the LFPA program, and if this bill goes forward, that would create the outline of how those funds would be spent.
Okay, Representative Jacobs.
Chair. Well, as I read the fiscal note, in the governor's recommendations with the budget, it's not going to go to the 2024, it's going to go to 2025. We've already taken 100,000 out of budget, but are we putting another $1 million into that budget? And then on top of that, it's just not going to fiscal year 2025, it's also going to be duplicated in 26, which we've already been allocated. I think the numbers were about 500 from the feds, or 5 million from the feds already.
The federal dollars go
Just
through.
for 1 second.
Oh, sorry.
But we're implementing a state program, but really, technically, we already have a program because we've already implemented this with the federal money. So really what we're doing is expanding government and SGF, correct?
The current bill would be outlining how we could use the new dollars apart from the federal grant, because the federal grant guidelines would no longer be governing or providing guidance for the additional 1 million.
Mr. Chair, I know it may be a little late, but if I would like to maybe suggest to the committee a safeguard or a sunset, because I wholeheartedly agree with the representative to my left about that this particular program could last forever if we're not careful. And that's how these government budgets and how this stuff happens. They get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and then we lose the federal funds. So then in desperation to hang on to these agencies or these little departments, we begin to start funding them more. And again, then government gets bigger and bigger. So I think it would, and this is just me speaking out loud, Mr. Chair, but I think it would be wise if we put somewhere with the wisdom of the body a sunset for this program. As long as we're receiving federal funds, that's how long we will do this program. And once we lose those federal funds, we're not going to find ourselves caught naked.
Stand by. Ms. Olson. The federal funds are not indefinite, is that correct? The federal funds go till the end of this year?
Correct. The federal program that we've received funding for of the $5 million can be spent on food through the end of the calendar year of 2024. This $1 million would extend us through fiscal year of '25, so into another growing season based on the funding that is in the budget currently.
Just a second. Okay. But is there another allocation of $5 million coming from the federal government?
That we do not know. We've received 2 allocations of funding, each roughly about $2.5 million. The second round of funding had a few more stipulations on it than the first round, but they were essentially for the same program. So we have $5 million through the end of calendar year '24.
Just a sec. I'll come back to you, Representative Jacob, just a moment. I want to get to Representative Blex first, and then we'll do Representative Fairchild, and then Probst. Yes. Okay. Go ahead, Representative Blex.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't know whether I'll clear the water or muddy it, but what would happen if we don't do this? I mean, you're going to run, as I understand it, you're going to run out of money at the end of 2024 as far as this food bank program and feed that. If we choose as a committee not to take any action or just kill it, then what happens?
We would continue the federal program until that program ceases. My understanding, and if I can specify, this, if we were to continue the program, provides the outline of how the agency and the food banks would utilize the funds. If you pass it and there's not funding, it sits there. We wouldn't be doing anything with it. It would just be on our books as a program that's authorized in the agency but doesn't have any funding to support it.
Would we lose that money that's already there, or we couldn't have the authority to spend it, or just?
The federal funding is not tied at all to this bill or to the state funding that is being proposed in the governor's budget.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Representative Fairchild.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess that sort of answered my question, because my question was just about the fiscal note, about how there's $1 million in the state general fund in the fiscal note and doesn't say anything about federal money. But then I guess she said that the federal money isn't specifically tied to this bill. Am I understanding that correctly?
That's correct.
Okay. Representative Probst.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I'll apologize to the committee in advance if I get a little hot on this. We spend all this time hand-wringing over this little bit of money that's actually going to put food, good food, raised by local farmers in people's mouths. We're going to take this food from local growers and use this program to support those efforts, which we heard testimony from people saying that it would supported their operations, allowed them to grow. And we're putting this food into food banks so that people who can't afford some of this can get this. We throw away money on tax credits and exemptions. You're going to see a bill in no time that's giving away an indefinite tax exemption on sales tax for data centers. That's coming your way. And we're going to pass it. I guarantee you we're going to pass it. And we're going to sit here and hand-wring over $1 million of food for poor people? We've got to get over this. At the core of this is a way to support local businesses and also to help support people get better food at food banks. If you got food at a food bank, it ain't great. Giving them options to get local food fresh food is a better option. We waste more money in an afternoon than we're talking about on this program.
Call on Representative Jacobs again. You got any other comments or questions? What's that? Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. No, these are my concerns because again, what we do, we start a program and then the government bails out on us. And then what we're doing, we're going to perceivably take away taxpayer money to feed other taxpayers. Back in the old day, when you would take something that was not yours to give it to somebody else who did not have, there used to be titles for that particular participation unwillingly. We have multiple programs here in the state that will open up their doors. The state is not meant to be a food bank. That's meant to be private citizens and private organizations. So my only suggestion, the will of the body can do whatever they want. I'm just letting you know my thoughts. And trust me, Representative, I cannot stand all the tax abatements. But anyway, I think it would be prudent. A sunset doesn't mean it just closes. A sunset means here's a red flag. We better address this again, just so we're not going back to it over and over again if we so choose. So I am actually opposed of taking this $1 million, but I thought in the gratitude of Valentine's Day, I would show you the committee some love. So thank you, Mr. Chair. Top that one.
There's still time, my child, still time. You know, some of the bills in this committee, my heart has actually started to thaw, and it scared me. There's actually feeling there, so I want to get back to where it's frozen solid up. So, Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. As we talk about this sunset, I would like to invite the committee to relook at the testimony from harvesters that lists which of our communities and producers we will be taking from. By my count, 9 of the members here on this committee have a food pantry in their community that benefits from this program, which would imply agricultural producers that also benefit from the program. I could have missed somebody, but I have Ashland, Fort Scott, Hutchinson, Independence, Manhattan, Overland Park, Pretty Prairie, Topeka, and Winfield. And I did not have time to do a geographic, how far are you from the others, say Salina, because I was busy making sure my family and friends were safe from the shooting at Union Station today. But I would really caution the body that taking money away from producers and food away from children is a very bad look for this committee that often does very good work.
Other discussion? Representative Jacobs? Any other discussion? I mean, did you, we had talked about a possible sunset, if it's, if you have a concept, if it's just a few words, Kyle might be able to do that, and then we'll ask the,
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I mean, it's up to the will of the body. This is just my mind. Everybody has the right and the freedom to express their own thoughts. But that's the problem with what happens when people catch the hook with the federal government. They get hooked up on this stuff, and this is the warning of it. And then it seems like when we're trying to promote personal responsibility and we're not going to fund something forever, then you're the bad person. That's not the case. There has to be a stopping point. I mean, most of us have been here long enough and go through budgets. I'm telling you, these government agencies, and nothing against you guys, but you're doing your job too, but they grow and grow and grow every year. And you go back home and ask your people how their wallets are growing. You and I don't have the ability to go to the bank and say, I want another $150,000 plus 2 brand new FTEs to build a porch. That's not happening. We already have the federal money. We don't have to extend a program. If you want to extend it, then vote for it. That's fine. I'm just offering a sunset as long as we have federal dollars, or as it's proposed in this fiscal note, because right now, our budget only goes up to 2025. So it's the will of the body. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Other discussions? Representative Murphy.
Thank you, Chair. I think a sunset would be a good compromise.
Other discussion? Representative Jacobs?
Would the will of the body, again, we have 2 years here. We have 25 and 26. That's in this fiscal note. I don't even know if 26 is relative because we're not even working on those budgets, correct?
Correct.
So, well, not at this particular, and I'm still kind of fuzzy. Again, we took $100,000 out of this particular in a budget, but this bill is asking for $1 million. So I'm wondering if we do a sunset for this, would it bring it back up to $1 million, or would it keep it at 900,000, or is it another $1 million on top of the 900,000?
Okay. Well, okay, let's take a half step back here. We are not doing the appropriating in this committee. You appropriate in the budget committee. This is the policy piece. So, and we'll walk through the sunset here right quick. I think we can do it at the end of the bill. And, but we'll ask the maker of the motion. Is that, boy, I haven't done this in a long time.
I can just clarify with language.
No, I understand that. I'll let you work on, I'll try to quick explainer, and then if you're ready to make that explainer. But again, what this is doing, this is setting up the framework. Now, if the appropriations through your budget committee, I'm not sure whether the 100,000 doesn't really matter right now, but if it's 900 or in the full appropriations, it gets zeroed out. What we would do here, there's no mechanism, a financial mechanism for the program to work. As I think, as Ms. Olson said, it would be a program there with no funding.
Okay.
So that's I want to make sure we get the two things separate. But if you're willing, as we've heard some comments, let's talk about that and what this is kind of conceptual here. So it seems to be fairly simple if we agree to it. So what do you have, Kyle?
So I think a sunset provision could go to a new section at the very end. It would be a new section 5. And so first, I would just have to amend the definition of the act at the very beginning of the bill to say sections 1 through 5. And the sunset would say the provisions of the Kansas Farm to Food Bank Program Act, sections 1 through 5, and amendments thereto, shall expire and have no effect on and after July 1, 20, and then what would the date be?
Representative Jacobs?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess 2025, since that's all that's been.
Okay. This is an amendment.
There's no second.
Right.
So we'll say that's the motion for that language.
Representative Jacobs, do you move that amendment?
Did you second? No. I need a second.
Do I have a second by Murphy? Discussion on this amendment. Representative Probst.
Okay. I want to make sure, we've had a lot of discussion and we've had some explanation about things, but my understanding is we have federal funding for this through the end of 2024. And we will provide, if we put a sunset on this, we'll provide 1 year of funding. And that's it, which we could address through appropriations. We could not put a sunset in here, and we could address this with appropriations. As you've indicated, we would have a bill, we would have a program, and if through the appropriations process we decide not to fund it, we have a program with no funding. So that would be one, and I think a cleaner way to address this. But if we want to put a sunset on it, my proposal would be that we at least allow the program 2 years to exist, maybe even 3. We've done this for other things. But I think a 1 year sunset is probably not sufficient. So I would make a substitute motion to have a 5-year sunset.
Okay, do I have a second? Seconded by Carlin.
So we're,
Discussion? Representative Jacobs.
thank you, sir. So we're going to take a program that we only allocated money to 2025, and we're going to make it to 30 now?
Well, okay. The way I understand, but again, the way the process works is in this committee, we do policy. Any appropriation, this would come through the Ag and Natural Resources Budget Committee. If you strike, if the governor, future governors put this money in, $1 million, $5 million, $10, that's what that appropriation would be. Then we go through the appropriations process of the committee of the whole that meets in this room, and then on to omnibus and whatever. So there are several stop gaps to this, and I do understand. And so that's where, you know, sometimes since unlike the Senate where we don't serve as in our own budget committees. So that's, again, just for an explanation. So other discussion, then I want to bring Kyle back in to make sure we fully understand where we are before we vote. Representative Carlin.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I've been here a while and seen a lot of sunsets, but don't sunsets usually have a qualifier on them as well, such as unless such and such, and then it would go on, continue on, such as we're worried about federal funding. So,
Isn't it right?
it didn't, I wrote down what he said, it didn't say
Or
that.
Jason says, I mean, Representative Probst is not that way? Okay. Okay.
2020, it would be 2030.
Any more discussion you have? Any more
Well,
discussion?
I wasn't finished with my
Okay,
sentence
go
or
ahead.
question yet because
Okay.
I got interrupted because somebody didn't know what I was saying. And I don't know what I'm saying, but there's usually a qualifier. It'll say, you go, we sunset this in 5 years unless blah, 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 blah. Unless the federal government continues the program, or unless, there's usually something so that it can continue on if the funding is there. So that's what my question is. Do we need a qualifier? If we don't need a qualifier, but I also would remark at this point that if it was going to, if the motion that we extended was 5 years would be 2030, as Representative Jacobs commented. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, Mr. Hamilton, would you kind of explain where we are, or I think we can get to a spot where maybe we all understand. Is that correct?
Sure, we'll find out. So just to backtrack, we started with Representative Jacobs' motion, and I read that language for the sunset, that sections 1 through what would now be 5 would expire and have no effect on and after July 1, 2025. And then there was a substitute motion by Representative Probst. And the only change from the previous motion was to extend the sunset. So it would be 5 years from the effective date. So that would be 2029 when the program would expire. And then regarding Representative Carlin's comments about qualifying language, I'm not familiar with the inclusion of that type of qualifying language, and I would be a little nervous about hinging the effectiveness of state law on whether or not the federal government does something. I don't know if that's something we would want to do, but I am more familiar with qualifying language of just the provision shall be in effect for until this a certain year, and then the legislature has to review the provision. We have that kind of language for exceptions to the Open Records Act, but Mr. Chairman, are we clear as to where we are right now with the substitute motion?
I'm seeing on this side, clear as mud.
To have the program expire on and after July 1, 2029. That's the current motion.
Just it would expire 2029, correct? Okay, Representative Roth?
Just to clarify, basically, this is just subject to appropriations, correct?
The dollars would be.
Yeah, so if we pass this here, but then there is zero appropriation that comes out of appropriations this year, then this just sets in your agency as a line item with zero, correct? Okay, thank you very much.
Other discussion? Seeing none, everybody understand where we are with substitute motion? Representative Probst, you may close.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I move my motion.
All those in favor of the substitute motion by Representative Probst, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign. Aye. Chair is in doubt. What's that? Okay. All those in favor, raise your right hand. Motion is defeated, 7-8. We're back on the bill. So we go back to, oh, that's right. I'm sorry. We go back to, I've been in for 40 years. Okay, so now we're back on the Jacobs amendment, which is the sunset for, this is a 1 year, right? On and after July 1, 2025. Okay. On or after July of 2025. More discussion. Seeing none, Representative Jacobs, you may close on your motion.
I move my amendment.
All those in favor of the amendment by Representative Jacobs, signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed, same sign.
No.
Chair's in doubt. All those in favor of Jacobs' motion, not your motion, but your motion, signify by saying, or raise your right hand, sorry. Eight. Okay, opposed, same sign. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 6, is that what you have? 8 to 7, okay. Vote is 8 to 7, motion passes. We are back on the full bill again. Other discussion? As a reminder, this is the policy. The bigger fight was in the appropriations. Representative Minix.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I have a question for Kelsey, if she'd mind coming up. We're basically setting the policy or the vehicle, and appropriations will have the option of funding it or not. And this policy that we put together, to me, this is very close on a 8 to 7 vote here. There isn't anything definitive about this by any means. It gives us room to have further discussion on this over the next year, but this bill will give you some guidelines or guardrails so that you can go ahead and administer the program, correct?
Yes, that is correct.
Other discussion? Again, all we voted for is amendments. Representative Probst? We are still discussing the bill as the whole, as amended, the bill as amended. Representative White.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I heard my hometown mentioned. I have volunteered at my local food bank. Our community gives, it's a local food bank. I have helped unload a van that went back, I believe, Hutchison to get food. And it was just bottled water. Our water isn't that good in Ashland, but it's not that bad. So I just, from an outside viewing in, it's our church is what does this. This is a volunteer thing, and I think it's a good thing. It brings our community together. But I have failed to see green vegetables. Thank you.
Okay. Other discussion? Representative Featherston.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm wondering, since we have the experts from Harvesters here, if they'd like to discuss if more funding is needed to bring green vegetables to the fine town of Ashland.
If you'd like, state your name for the record.
Thank you. I'm Karen Siebert, and I'm with Harvesters, the community food network. And we're a food bank based in Kansas City. But I'm here also today representing the Kansas Food Bank, which would have been the one that gave you the water, and then also the Second Harvest Community Food Bank. And together, we serve all 105 counties in the state. And I appreciate that. I'm sorry that you only got water on that shipment. We are based, a food bank is based on donations. We are originally, a lot of people, just to give you some background on how food banks work, we're large food collection and distribution facilities. We don't do direct client service. We work with all of these local food pantries that are providing that service to their communities, and we provide the food to those food pantries. We are not able to provide everything that those food pantries need. We provide about probably 65 to 70% of what they distribute. They're purchasing food as well, doing their own food drives as well. We have people on staff that we are looking for coins in the couch. We are looking for food wherever we can find it. We are built, as a system, we're built on, and I hate to use this term because I think it doesn't provide the dignity that we want to provide to the people who are coming to us for help, but we take food waste and we get that to where it's needed. I prefer to call it excess food because we don't feed people waste. But that is the term that the EPA and the USDA use when they talk about excess food that's left in the field that will be plowed under, that will go to compost. We want to make sure that that food gets to people in need. We've put a lot of inputs into that food. We've used our precious water resources. We want to make sure that food doesn't go to waste. If we can get that from our Kansas farmers and get it here to the food banks, we'll get that out to where we can to feed people in need. We get food from all over the country. We're getting it from California. We might find that there's a truckload full of cantaloupes in Rocky Ford, Colorado, and we'll bring them in. And we hate that there's food here in Kansas that we could be rescuing, but we don't have the resources to do it. This is such a great program. 90% of this money is going directly to producers who have food that maybe is blemished or it's too small, it's bees that can't be sold in the grocery store, they don't have a market at the farmer's market. We can use these resources to get that food to the food banks and get that out to people in need. And everybody needs more fresh food. If we have it right here, that's all that this is doing. And we want to take that, we use very little overhead. We're using existing systems. That when LFPA was started, this federal program, they let the states design it. They said, you have 2 years of money, you have $5 million to design this program, and we designed it to be as simple and efficient as possible. We're using our existing food bank transportation system, but what we have to do is get the food from where it is to the food banks. Once we have it, we're just putting it on the trucks that are already going out to Ashland. They're already going out to Osage County. And we're not taking any remuneration for that. We're just so grateful to have this great, nutritious food to get to our food pantries. And so it's one of the most efficient things that we can do if we can just get that processing piece, that transportation piece to get the food from where there's excess, from where it is to where there's need. So, sorry, I hope that helps explain the process.
Sure.
Can I add one other thing about the LFPA program? What that program did is it's only a 2-year program. It was using Commodity Credit Corporation funds from the Secretary of Agriculture and some ARPA funds. Those funds end at the end of 2024. And we have used those funds to set up this system, to develop those relationships with the producers. And this $1 million will allow us to keep that going and not to lose that momentum. And so it was never intended to be a long-term federal program. It actually is designed after state-level programs that existed first. Pennsylvania has had this for 20 years. The federal government mimicked what was being done creatively in the states first. So,
But
thank you.
That's enough. No, that's enough. I'm the chairman of the committee.
Sorry.
Thank you.
Sorry, okay.
What we'll do, it's going to make it very difficult to do our job. I'm going to give everybody the opportunity to get in what they want to say, okay? I can be a nice person and I can be Ken, so whichever one you want. Other discussions? Yes, Representative McDonald.
I'm a little late to this discussion, so I apologize. You all probably know the answer. Kansas farmers will get dollars for these crops, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right, very good. Other discussion? Representative Roth.
Just a comment. Our family's been involved with farmers markets from the beginning, and I heard Representative say Winfield. And so about 30 years ago at the farmers markets, the food pantry would give people a certificate, and they could come to the farmers market and trade that certificate for vegetables. And so, I mean, that was done something that we've done locally with that. And so, and I'm not for sure if harvesters deliver food, you deliver food to Winfield Food Pantry?
Yeah, go quickly, yes.
Sorry.
It's through the Kansas Food Bank. And that program that you're talking about is called Double Up Food Bucks. And that's actually started through the GusNIP program as part of the Farm Bill. But it is done locally here, yes.
All right.
Well, my point is we've done a lot of this stuff to get fresh food to people locally and not through, I mean, they said they have a program, but they were just little handmade things that came in.
Okay.
And so, thank you. Sorry.
All right. Okay. Now, we've almost heard the whole bill again, so I apologize. So, Representative Younger.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just real quick, I just want to say I've not been on a budget committee. I don't know that side of it, but I've seen families at the food banks around the block multiple times, and you know, whatever our thoughts on sharing this food, but I've seen young children that have benefited from this, that they wouldn't have the food if it weren't for these organizations. So I fully support this. Thank you.
Other discussions on this bill as amended? And again, I do apologize. I didn't want to necessarily rework everything, and but this is one step of many before it gets too far. So with that being said, Representative Younger, you may close.
Mr. Chair, I close. Thank you.
We will now vote on House Bill 2564 as amended, although, right?
Well, I think sometimes people will reiterate the motion again.
Okay. That'd be fine. You're correct. Representative Younger, would you restate your motion?
I do.
Would you restate your motion?
Oh, restate. Mr. Chair, I'd make a motion to pass this out as amended.
Moved and seconded. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Post same sign. Motion carried. House Bill 2564 is passed. Representative Featherston votes aye. Anyone else wants their vote recorded? Sure. Representative McDonald votes aye. Anyone else? Very good. Thank you for your indulgence, committee. Tomorrow, we will have final action on the pesticide bill. That's House Bill 2607. Again, you have some information in your email from Kelsey Olson on the things we were asking for some from the explainer. No, I'm sorry, that was for today. We have a lot of information on the pesticide bill. I do apologize. I guess I must have had too many sweet tarts, or is that what you get on Valentine's Day? Oh. I'm like 4 hours away from my sweetie. You're not, so maybe that's why.
He's in heaven.
Is that, well, see?
Pretty far away.
Well, we'll talk about that later. But anyway, no. Also, tomorrow, we will have an update on the Kansas State Fair, the Executive Director, Brian Schultz. So anything else for the good of the cause? We got you out early. We didn't take the whole time today, so we are adjourned.